Hey guys, in this video, we're going to take a look at a way for parents to monitor their baby's activities and growth through a Docker container called Baby Buddy. Now, I do want to be very clear, this video is sponsored by Linode. I do want to thank them for giving me the opportunity to partner with them to make this video. If you'd like to follow along with this video, be sure to head down to the description where you'll find a link where you can jump over to Linode and get $100 in free credit to check out their service with no obligation for 60 days. So here we are on Baby Buddy's GitHub page. We can see all of the files that are used to build this application. And right here under the About section, it says a Baby Buddy to help caregivers track sleep, feedings, diaper changes, and tummy time to learn about and predict a baby's needs without as much guesswork. So this is, like it says, a good way to kind of keep track for your own needs, but maybe you've got a doctor who needs more information about your child, your baby, your infant, whatever. This is a great way to keep logs of everything so that you can then share that information with them when they have questions about certain activities. So with that said, now that we've kind of taken a look at this, let's actually take a look at what Baby Buddy looks like, and then we'll get into the process of installing this on Linode. So here we are on the profile that I've generated for demonstrative purposes with my picture, the channel name, when I uploaded the first Open Media Vault video to this channel, and then below that, of course, the age that it is determined based on the information that I've provided it. Below that, we've got some quick links of dashboard, timeline. Over here, we've got reports, we can edit, and we can delete. So over here on the right-hand side, we can kind of see a timeline of kind of what's going on, when DB started feeding, when they finished feeding, again, when they started feeding, when they finished feeding. So if we come over here to the home page, we've got kind of a dashboard of just a quick glance as far as what's going on, what has been completed, what hasn't been completed. You know, we've got no diaper changes here. We can see how many feedings, how much they consumed, whether or not they were self-fed or bottle-fed or other means of procuring nourishment, recent sleep, today's naps, tummy time, diaper changes. All of this is just a very quick glance, and I kind of dig this. If we come over, let's click home right here. That's where we are now. If we click on children, maybe you're a caretaker, maybe you monitor or take care of multiple children. You could come into here and have access to everybody that you are currently in charge of so that you can quickly navigate to each of those different individuals to enter information about them. If we come back to home, again, DB Tech, this is where we started out originally when we were looking in here as far as things were concerned there. Up at the top, dashboard, that kind of takes us back to home. Timeline, again, takes us back to here, children. So you kind of see that this is all all of the stuff you need quick access to is kind of exactly where you want it to have quick access. It's very easy to find everything you need when you need it. So if we come up here to children, again, we can add children, we can add notes. If we come over here to notes, there are no notes, but I can come into here and click add a note. If there were more children available or in the system, you'd be able to select the note or the child there and then add notes about them. Again, children here, we can add children by clicking here, put in their first name, their last name, the date of birth, and a picture. Very straightforward, just setting up a profile there. Under measurement, we've got BMI, which it is what it is. Head circumference, weight, temperature, height rather, not weight. Weight is down here. Height, temperature, and weight. And then again, you can obviously go in and enter any of these. If I come into here, we can see that this is in inches, as you would normally measure a child. You wouldn't say this baby's 1'3" or whatever, right? You would measure them in inches until they're, I don't know, teenagers or whatever. So that's kind of what's going on in here. You can kind of go in and enter the information relevant to each of the different categories under measurements. Under activities, we've got changes, feedings, pumping. This would be helpful for mothers who want to remember when they last pumped, how much they last pumped, that sort of thing. Sleep, as far as when they slept and things like that. If we come into sleep, we can edit this. Again, we've got times there. We can add notes. Baby coughed, baby had a rough time sleeping, whatever the case is. Again, more notes. And so that's kind of what's going on there. Timers, I actually kind of dig timers. If we come in and start a new timer, again, we can choose the child that we want to have a timer on. We can just say test. And then, of course, the start date would be right now. If we click submit, this one kind of confused me at first. If we click submit, we're taken to here. And even when I first got into there, it started the timer kind of in the background. And I actually was really surprised by that. I love that they do that. And so we've got this timing here, or this timer here rather. And once we're here, we can then categorize how long they were feeding, how long they slept, how long they were doing tummy time, things like that very, very simply. You know, if we come over here and we click on feeding, then we can, again, we've got the time of start and stop. What type of food was it? Was it breast milk formula, fortified breast milk, solid food? Were they self-fed, bottle, parents? You know, they've got different options there. How much? This would be in ounces, I would assume. It doesn't really say anywhere in any of this, I don't think. If you hover over, there's no notes or anything as far as pop-ups. Again, more notes. Baby had a hard time latching. Baby fought, whatever the case is, you can put notes in there, and you can tag this if you wanted to have, maybe there's a certain thing that maybe your doctor wants you to keep track of. So you might have a tag of doctor's, doctor's note, that's fine. And then this way, if we would click submit, you know, we could then go back and look at tags later on and kind of have all of the information, all the different things the doctors want us to tag. We can go to that tag and pull up all of the information the doctor might want. So if we come back to the Baby Buddy, again, we're back on our home page here. If we come up to the top right, we have an admin area. We've got settings. So if we wanted to update user settings, we can do that here. That would be for our account, password, logout, API browser users, and database admin. So this does, when we see database admin here, this does use an SQLite or a SQLite database. It doesn't use like a Maria database or a MySQL database. Everything is kind of contained within the container, and I appreciate that. Again, there are ways that you can use a different database if you wanted to use, you know, MySQL or Maria database or something like that. That information is available in the documentation over on the GitHub page. So definitely check that out if you're interested in using a different database than the SQLite or SQLite, whatever. But with that said, let's take a look at how easy this is to get set up over on Linode. Okay, so before we jump over to Linode, I suppose one of the next things we should do is actually take a look at the Docker Compose that I used to deploy Baby Buddy on my local server here. So here we are taking a look at that over on my Portainer. This is a version 2.1 stack or Docker Compose. You can kind of use those interchangeably here. Our service is Baby Buddy. We're using Linux servers Baby Buddy. I really enjoy using Linux server containers because they're very, very good at making sure that everything works exactly the way it's supposed to work. Below that, we've got a container name of Baby Buddy. We've got an environment variable of PUID and PGID. Now these by default are 1,000 or 1,000 rather 1000, which is going to be fine for when we move over to Linode. However, I had to change that for my local setup to give permissions where they needed to be. Below that, we've got a time zone of America/Denver. So below that, we've got some trusted origins here, basically just a way to help mitigate some data breaches and that sort of thing. So we've got a local loopback or IP address with the port, as well as this next one would be the IP address of the container on the server, but that would be for local uses only. If you were going to put this on a domain name, like we're going to here in a moment, you would actually put the URL of the domain name there. Below that, we've got some volumes. We've got basically where is the information going to be stored on the host side, and inside the container, it's going to be mapped to the config folder. We've got some ports. Originally, this was 8,000, but because I'm using Portainer, it uses port 8,000, so I changed it to 8142, just an arbitrary random number that I picked, and it had that mapped to 8,000, and then the restart policies unless stopped. Now, that's for a very basic setup. I'm going to tweak this just a little bit when we get over to Linode and get that set up. So I wanted to kind of preface that this is a very basic setup for kind of a local install. For doing things over on Linode, we are going to change that just a little bit. Okay, so here we are over on Linode. We're logged in, we're ready to go. The next thing we want to do is create a Linode. We'll see that right up here. So if we click that and come over here to Marketplace, what we want to do is actually look for Docker. That's just going to make our lives a little bit easier so we don't have to set up quite as much. So we're going to click Docker. Below this, we're just going to minimize this for right now. We don't need any of the advanced options. For our image, that's going to be what operating system do we want to use for this setup. I'm going to use Debian 11. You could use 10, or you could even use Ubuntu 20.04 LTS if you wanted to do that. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to use Debian 11. It's just a preference for me. The region, for this, you'll want to choose basically wherever you'll be accessing it the most often. So I'm going to just use Dallas, Texas, because that's the closest option to me. However, there are additional options kind of all over the world if you wanted to switch to that. For this, we're going to use a shared CPU just because this isn't a terribly intense program as far as resources that it needs to run. So we're just going to use the shared CPU, and you could probably get away with the 1 gig. I'm going to use the 2 gig setup. That's going to give us 2 gigs of RAM. It's going to give us a monthly cost of $10 a month. Again, there's that 2 gigs of RAM we were talking about, 1 CPU core, 50 gigs of storage, and 2 terabytes of transfer, which I really appreciate. And then we get network in and network out of 40 gigs and 2 gigs. So lots of throughput available on these setups here. With that said, we can scroll down a little further. We're going to give this a label. Just name it something appropriate so you can remember what it is later on. I'm just going to call it Baby Buddy. Oops. Like so. We're going to give it a root password. And if we wanted to, or if we had an SSH key on our local machine, we could actually add that SSH key to this. And then if we needed to connect via SSH in a terminal, which we will be doing later, we could do that more simply and more securely using an SSH key. There are tutorials about that actually on Linode's docs, so definitely refer to that if you've got questions about how to do that. We're not going to worry about a VLAN. That doesn't really apply to what we're doing here. However, backups and private IPs definitely do. You definitely don't want to lose your data if something goes wrong. So having a backup is a great way to handle that. And then I always prefer to have a private IP just for my own reasons, I suppose. So we're going to go ahead and click on Create Linode. And here in a few minutes, this will be all set up and ready to go. The next screen that we're going to end up seeing says provisioning, then it's going to booting, and then it's going to kind of go through its setup. So while it's doing that, now is a good time to start taking a look at adding a domain name to our Linode here so that we can put a domain name on it and access our baby buddy through the domain name, right? So let's take a look at that now. So to add a domain name to our setup, what we're going to do is come over here to Domains. We're going to click on Create a Domain. Our domain is required, obviously, so we're just going to put in dbtech.tips. Of course, put in whatever domain you'd like to use for your setup. We're going to put in an email address. And for the insert default records, by default, it says do not insert default records for me. Well, we're going to change that. We want this to be default records from one of my Linodes. And then we're going to select Baby Buddy here and click on Create Domain. So in order for that to work, you will, of course, have to have purchased the domain you want to use, and you'll have to have pointed it to Linode. And let me show you what that looks like now. So here we are in my domain registrar. This is where I purchased dbtech.tips. And basically what you need to do is set your authoritative name servers to ns1.linode.com and ns2.linode.com and ns3 and ns4 and ns5.linode.com. Now, the thing to keep in mind with changing DNS or authoritative name servers is that depending on the registrar that you use, this could take 24 to 48 hours. That's kind of the general rule of thumb. However, it often happens faster if you purchase from a reputable domain registrar. It's one of the reasons that I use Porkbun, but that's what you need to do. You need to set all of your authoritative name servers to ns1 through ns5.linode.com and give it a little time for it to propagate across the internet. And at that point, you can start using that domain name over on Linode. So with that said, we've got our domain name set up over here. We can see the NS1 through NS5 is actually listed here. The subdomain, we're not going to use a subdomain for this. This is just kind of a test run just to show how this works. If, of course, you wanted to set up a subdomain, you could easily go over here and say add in a record and then add it, whatever subdomain you wanted to there, point it to the IP address, and you'll be good to go. With that said, though, let's jump back over to our newly set up Linode and get some software installed, some Docker containers installed to help us manage this new setup. So here we are on our Linodes. We're going to click on Baby Buddy. And right here is our IP address with SSH root at our IP address. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy this SSH root at, like so. And then I'm going to open up a console or a terminal, depending on what operating system you're on. That nomenclature will change a little bit. So we're going to come over to here. I'm just going to go ahead and paste that SSH root at. Now, if I had an SSH key, when I hit enter, it would just automatically log me in. I don't have an SSH key, so it's not going to, so I'll have to enter a password. It's saying, hey, this is the first time you've connected. Are you sure that's what you want to do? I'm going to say yes. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and make this bigger so that it's easier for you guys to see. Okay, so now we are logged in. Now there are a couple of bits of software that I want to install first. The first one is Portainer. I like using Portainer to manage my my containers and that sort of thing when it's possible. It isn't always possible, but when it is, I like to use Portainer. Once we're done with installing Portainer, then we're going to install Nginx Proxy Manager to help us with SSLs and things like that. So let's go ahead and get Portainer installed first. Okay, so if we head over to Portainer's documentation as far as installing Portainer on Linux with Docker, what we're going to do, you can actually skip this first step. It will do it automatically. But what we're going to do is just come over here to Community Edition. We're going to click copy like so. And then we're going to come back over to our terminal window here, our command window, whatever. We're going to paste that in there and hit go. And now it's going to go ahead and download Portainer and get it set up.
A few moments later.
And just like that, we're ready to go. So what we want to do next is actually grab the IP address of our container, or of our Linode. I should get my nomenclature correct here. We're going to copy that, paste that in there. We're going to go to port 9443 like so and hit enter. Oops. I lied. We need to do HTTPS. There we go. And go ahead and click on advanced and proceed. And then it's going to ask us to create an admin account. Now, please don't use admin as your username. So once you have entered your username and password that meets all of their criteria, you can go ahead and click on create user. We can go ahead and click on get started. And then I'm going to close that. So here we are logged in, we're good to go. We're going to dismiss this banner up here at the top. So we're going to click right here where it says local. And then what we want to do is actually the first thing is come on here over here to where it says environments. We're going to click on local, and then we're just going to paste in our public IP address. If you don't, it confuses things later. It's just better to do it now. So we're going to go ahead and click on update environment like so. And then we're going to go to stacks. So the next thing we want to do here is actually install Nginx Proxy Manager as a reverse proxy, partially for SSL reasons, but also partially for some security stuff that we can add to this if we wanted to do that later on. So what we're going to do is click on Add a Stack. We're going to call this, I'm just going to call it NPM for Nginx Proxy Manager. Then we'll jump over to Nginx Proxy Manager, click on Get Started, and then we're going to come down to right here, and we're just going to go ahead and copy this information right here. We're going to come back. We're going to paste this in. We are going to change just a little bit when we get to this point, but version 3 services is app. This could be anything. Our image will be JSC21's Nginx Proxy Manager, restart policies unless stopped. We've got ports 80 and 443. Those are going to be our traffic ports. That's kind of how the system is going to route traffic on our setup. And then that's for 80 is for our HTTP, and 443 is for HTTPS. And then 81 is for our dashboard. You can change that if you'd like to do that. For our volumes here, I'm going to do /home/docker/npm. And I'm just going to copy that and put this right there. So we've got a data folder and a Let's Encrypt folder kind of all stored together for our Nginx Proxy Manager setup. So once we're happy with this, what we'll do is we'll scroll down and click on Deploy the Stack. We'll give this a minute to deploy, and then once it's ready, we'll jump over to Nginx Proxy Manager and kind of take a quick look around there. Okay, so now our Nginx Proxy Manager is up and running. So what we can do next is right here, it says running. If we take a look at our logs, it is currently kind of going through a setup process in the background to make sure that it is configured the way it needs to be configured for the sake of getting this all set up here. So let's go back, and then we can click right over here on port 81. And there we go. So if you're not sure what the username and password is to get logged in for the first time, what we're going to do is come back over here. And right here, it actually has it listed. It will ask us to change this once we get logged in the first time. So don't worry about that too much, as we will be required to change it. And just like that, it's saying, hey, we want you to change this. So we'll do that. And then our password, and we'll click save. So now we have our administrator user set up for this. And at this point, Nginx Proxy Manager is basically set up and ready to go so that we can now get our baby buddy containers set up. And then we can come back over to here to do some configuration for the domain name, the SSL, and a little bit of security. So what we're going to do is come back over here to stacks. We're going to click stacks over here again. We're going to click add a stack, and we're just going to paste this in. Now there are some changes that we're going to make to this just because we don't have this volume path right here. So we're going to call this /home/docker, just like we did before. Again, we're not going to use port 8000 because Portainer is actually using that port already. So I'm just going to leave this on port 8142 like so. And then our trusted origins here, we're going to change this just a little bit. And we're going to put in an IP address, or we're going to change the IP address to an actual domain name. We're going to change this to https dbtech.tips like so. And then of course we want to give this a name up here, click like that. And then we want to change the UID and GID to 1000 for both of those. Those are very standard for Linode to use. In order to make this work properly, there's one more step we need to add, and that is a network. So what we're going to do is actually come over here to networks. We're going to open that in a new tab. And we're going to find our npm default. That is for Nginx Proxy Manager. That's the network that we want to use. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to come back over to here. I'm going to say network. Like so. It is actually networks, like so. And then once we've got that part's done, but we need to actually declare that it is a network that already exists. So what we're going to do, we're going to do this, we're going to rename that. So basically, we've got our version 2.1. Our service will be Baby Buddy. Again, we're using the Linux server Baby Buddy image. Our container name is Baby Buddy. We've got our environment variables of UID and GID, both at 1000. Those are very standard again. We've got a time zone. We've also got our trusted origins as far as being able to access this on the internet, on our network, whatever the case is there. Our volume, we've got home Docker Baby Buddy mapped to config. Ports, we mapped 8142 to 8000. Our restart policy is unless stopped, and we're attaching it to the npm_default network. So once we have all of this set up and ready to go, we can scroll down and click on deploy the stack. And hopefully we don't get any error messages. And as long as we don't, the page will reload, and we should be able to go over and get our domain name set up to work with our new Baby Buddy container. Okay, so that actually went off without a hitch. I'm super stoked to see that. So if we open up Baby Buddy here, we can see that it is running. We can see that we have an IP address here. We've got some published ports. Let's take a look at the logs right here under quick actions. So this all looks good from what I can see here. I don't see anything that looks alarming or any error messages or anything like that. So let's go ahead and just click right here. And right here, we've got Baby Buddy up and running. Now, that's all well and good, but we don't want to access this on on an IP address. We want to actually access this on our domain name. So let's jump back over to Nginx Proxy Manager and get our domain name set up. So what we're going to do is come over again to Nginx Proxy Manager. We're going to go to SSL certificates. We're going to add an SSL certificate, and we're going to click on Let's Encrypt. For our domain name, it's going to be dbtech.tips. We'll hit enter, and we're going to click on test server reachability. Your server is reachable, and creating certificates should be possible, so that's good. We like to see that. We're going to click close. So below this, we've got an email address for Let's Encrypt. We're going to leave that alone. Make sure that that is an accurate email address. You could use an ENS challenge if you wanted to. I'm not going to. And make sure that you agree to the Let's Encrypt terms of service and click Save. Give this a minute to generate the SSL. And then once that's done, we can get our domain name set up with that SSL to help us add a little bit of security. Okay, so here is our SSL all set up and ready to go. So we're going to go to hosts. We're going to go to proxy hosts. Then we're going to add a proxy host. Our domain name again will be dbtech.tips and hit enter. Our scheme will be HTTP because the container itself doesn't have an SSL port. It's not using like 8443 or 9443. It's just using port 8000 or in our case 8142 on the host side. But because it doesn't have an SSL built into it, we're going to leave this as HTTP. If it had an SSL built into it, we would switch this to HTTPS, but it doesn't, so we're not going to. Now, our forward host name /IP. If you've watched my other videos, you would think that you were going to put in the IP address of our Linode, for instance, or our Portainer or whatever. But that's not the case. We actually want to do something a little bit different here. We're going to come over to Portainer. Let's actually come over and look at our containers here. And if we take a look, we can actually see that Portainer is running on 172.17.0.2. But if we look at Nginx Proxy Manager and Baby Buddy, they're both running on 172.18. You can see that here on both of those, .0, .2, and then .3. So this is actually the IP address that we want to use, is this 172 address in this particular instance. We also want to use, because we're doing this on the container side of things, we're also going to use the published port of 8000, because again, that's the container stuff that we're working with here. So we're going to put in our IP address. We're going to tab over and put in port 8000. You can enable cache support or cache assets, WebSocket support, and block common exploits. For our SSL, we're going to jump over here and we're going to use our dbtech.tips. We're going to check all these boxes again just for some extra security here and click save. And with all of that set up, I should, in theory, be able to click dbtech.tips right here. And there we go. Now we're on a domain name with an SSL. If we come up here and click the little drop down, the connection is secure. And here we can get more information about what's going on. Our certificate is valid via R3, via Let's Encrypt. So that's all set up and ready to go. Now, in order to get logged in, now that we've got everything set up, our username and password are both admin. We want to change that. So let's get logged in first, like so. And here we are, we're set up, we're ready to go. Now we can start adding children and keeping tabs on them, that sort of thing. But let's come up here and click on settings. And no, let's not do anything in settings. Settings is fine. Let's actually do password. So our old password is admin. So we're gonna go ahead and change our password there. Password updated, good to go. So now that we've got our password updated and changed so that it isn't the default, I would actually probably think to go a step further and create a new user that doesn't use the admin username and then trash the admin user just as an additional preventative measure. But that is security that's up to you as far as how you want to handle that. So now that we've got all of this set up and we're able to access our Baby Buddy over on our domain name, if we wanted to go an extra step, we could actually add an access list to this via Nginx Proxy Manager. And all we've got to do in order to do that is come over to Nginx Proxy Manager, come over here to Access Lists, click on Add an Access List. Like so, we can give it a name of restrict, like so. We can say satisfy any authorization. You can either use a username and password, or you can even restrict it by IP address. And so I'll let you choose how you want to handle that. Once you've got that set up, we're just going to do something like this. Oops. Like so, and click save. And then what you do is just come over to here, go to proxy hosts, open our proxy host here, and then make our access list, or change our access list from public to restrict, click save, and then it should then restrict access based on the criteria you gave it, whether it's using a username and password or restricting by IP address. So you do have a couple of additional ways that you can handle that as well. So guys, there is Baby Buddy over on Linode, and the reason I thought that this would actually be a really good fit for Linode is that if you're a new parent, you probably don't want to deal with setting up your own hardware. You may not have the money or the time or the wherewithal to deal with your own hardware. So I thought that this would be a really good case of using a third-party system to set something like this up, to keep tabs on something that you were going to make publicly accessible, you know, possibly to your doctor. Maybe you want to have your doctor have access to this if you wanted to do that sort of thing. So that's Baby Buddy, man. That's how easy it is to get Baby Buddy set up and ready to go over on Linode for the sake of monitoring activities and feedings and things like that for whatever your needs happen to be. Again, hopefully you found this video helpful, and if you did, it would mean a lot to me if you give the video a thumbs up. If you'd like to go check this out over on Linode for yourself, be sure to head down to the link in the description so that you can get $100 in free credit from Linode to check them out free for 60 days. But I think with all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I do want to thank you guys for spending a few minutes of your day with me today, and I will talk to you in the next video.